Hello, hello, hello. I'm Ardy Danielewicz, and this is How to Build a Brand, the podcast which demystifies brand, advertising and marketing and makes it available to you, the ambitious entrepreneur looking to build your brand. This is episode 1. Today I'm joined by Richard Alford, marketing maestro, ex-Saatchi ad man of the 90s, my business partner, the infamous legend of advertising. I've learned pretty much everything, disputable, about advertising from Richard, and today we're going to understand the basics and the expertise that he has garnered over the last 40 years working with some of the world's largest brands. Richard, I suppose this is a bit of a wet dream for you, being able to flex your radio voice on a podcast like this.
Yeah, and I think it's a great privilege for everyone who's going to listen to it. All 6 of them will be absolutely overjoyed by my contributions.
So Richard, you and I have been working together now for 8-9 years. Mm-hmm. We launched a business called M&C Saatchi Accelerator, which worked specifically with startup and scale ups. And over the course of the last 8 years, we've now done something like 250 different projects, scaling all sorts of brands and businesses globally. And that has ultimately led to our business dragNdrop, which is the supporter of this podcast. So look, let's just go back a little bit. Tell us about you. How did you get into advertising, marketing, this sort of thing, and take us back a little bit.
What, all the way back to the beginning of my career?
Go back to the beginning, Richard.
Blimey.
I've never heard it. Tell me.
Have you not? I bet you have, hundreds of times.
I have.
Okay. So the answer is I applied from university to join an advertising agency, and after much toing and froing, I was more or less unsuccessful in every respect of applying. And all the big agencies I wanted to work for all said no for some reason. And but then I managed to get a second go at getting a job at Grey, mm-hmm. which used to be an advertising agency. I'm not sure if it still is, actually. It might be there somewhere. And I did their graduate training scheme, and then 40, whatever it is, years later, here I am telling everyone about my fantastic journey through advertising. And yeah, I mean, I've worked on lots of successful brands, but I've also worked on numerous failures. And I think you learn more from the failures than you do. I do think
you did get fired a couple of times.
I got fired a few times. Yeah, I got sacked, and and I then stayed at M&C Saatchi though for 28 years, but then eventually, obviously, that ended in tears. So as it always does, but 28 years wasn't too bad. Yeah. So go on. What do you want to know?
So I guess there's only one real question really, which is what is a brand and why is it important? And I guess a lot of businesses that we speak to on a daily basis, they're brilliant at building their businesses, but they're not necessarily as good at building a brand. And so I guess my question is, what, in your view, what is a brand? Why should anyone care about building a brand? Is it important? Is it overrated? Is it underrated? What are the key basics of a brand, and how can someone that's brilliant at building a business start to build their brand, and what impact can that have on their business?
I mean, I think it's very important and all of that. I've been practicing this answer, by the way. This what is a brand thing, and what does a brand do? I've just noticed in the last sort of 40 years that there seem to be fewer brands now than there used to be. There's loads of businesses, hundreds of companies, and lots of people advertising, mm-hmm. but not many of them seem to be what I would describe as a brand, because my definition of a brand, by the way, in airports, there are billions of textbooks on what is a brand. I mean, I'm sure this isn't the right answer, but it's my answer. A brand is a tool for predisposing customers to your product or service. Right. So it simply means, a brand means you've heard about it a bit and you arrive at the transaction a little bit predisposed to buy it or to use it or whatever. So it makes you, without really any knowledge of it or any sort of actual evidence or experience of it, you arrive, at this point of purchase thinking, I quite like this product or service, whatever it is, this brand, and I'm going to buy it. And I'm going to perhaps be prepared to pay a bit more for it. I'm going to probably like it. So you go in feeling all quite warm and fuzzy towards it. So that's how I see it. I just see it as a sort of prep instrument for helping you transact more seamlessly and in a more enjoyable way.
And what are okay, fine, understood. What are the elements?
Do you think that's the right answer?
I think a brand is something that creates more of an emotional resonance with an individual, I would say. That is my definition of it. So, I might buy one brand of a can of beans, but they might just be a can of beans, I might not feel any differently about them. Whereas another can of beans will make me feel particularly special about it, or it might make, I don't know, it'll just speak to me in some way that is, if you're not really thinking about it, sort of in a way sort of magical. You're not really thinking about why you like it, but you're sort of drawn towards it.
Yeah, the sort of emotional side of it. My only thing I always think with that is, I always think, what about those brands that are completely rational and yet they're brilliant brands?
Like for example, what?
Oh, I don't know, some sort of, maybe some car brands or something which are sort of very technical and are all about sort of brilliant leading edge technology, or maybe. Boeing, their airplanes are falling apart at the moment, aren't they? But something like that, it's not. I don't feel a huge emotion towards Boeing, but I want to know it's brilliantly, rationally put together, and someone's really thought about it. That's why I just
guess
think
isn't that an element of a brand as well, which is making you think about something slightly differently. So it's a sort of functional element of it, but it's making you think their function is.
I guess you say that's
better
emotion
and stronger.
So that's an emotion kind of thing. Yeah.
I think the beauty of brands is it allows you to cheat a little bit, doesn't it? Because it makes you, as you say, you're essentially cheating an advantage versus your competitors by saying something more interesting, grabbing attention in a different way, fusing a relationship with a customer. You're cheating. You're gaining an advantage from your competitors by creating this little emotional little sideline with your customers.
Well, it means, if we go back to my rather brilliant earlier definition, which is a tool of predisposition, it does mean that your product or service doesn't have to be better than your competitors, because if you've got the brand sort of buoying you up a bit as people arrive to buy it, it doesn't matter if your mince pies are slightly worse than the other company's mince pies, because people will arrive going, I'm really excited about these mince pies because of their buttery crust or something. And so I do think that's how I see brands working. I see them working in a very sort of rational way, in a sense, which is that they give people a feeling or an impression of a product that helps them want it for less rational reasons and makes them buy it more readily.
Yeah, okay. So actually playing that out then, what's a good example of a brand that doesn't necessarily have the best product but manages to out-compete its competitors because they've got a more interesting way of seeing the world?
Well, dragNdrop.com. One I've been thinking about recently is it Range Rover or Land Rover? Which is the brand? Which is the
Land Rover?
Land Rover is the company. Range Rover.
Maybe Range Rover is a sub-brand.
Well, let's call it Range Rover as the brand, because my understanding is that Range Rovers get nicked the whole time. Number one, particularly if you live in a city. Number two, they break down quite a lot.
Yeah,
but they look marvelous and incredible, and also they're huge. There's a lot of things wrong with them rationally, but there seems to be a group of people, not including myself, who can literally collapse on the floor in sort of a pile of goo at the thought of a Range Rover, and they adore Range Rovers, and they wait on a waiting list for 18 months to get the newest Range Rover, which they then drive around, proverbially sort of Chelsea, and bump up on the curb and all. And I gather they are not very good vehicles.
But also that's also interesting, which is scarcity and emotional resonance and brand. Because take that example, Range Rover. I think it's actually the new Land Rover Defender, which is the most stolen car in the UK now, right?
Is it?
I think,
and the Range Rover's up there.
And the Range Rover's up there as well. But the interesting thing about the Land Rover Defender is, they've done some interesting things with brand partnerships recently. They did a brand partnership with Top Boy. Top Boy being one of the notoriously most interesting, coolest shows around. Produced by Drake. And so they did a collaboration with Top Boy. They've now become this kind of sexy, uber luxy kind of British G-Wagon type thing. They're now, getting nicked left, right and centre in London. There's also an article I saw the other day, which is it's now the most expensive car to insure in the UK.
Yeah, 20 grand or something to insure.
And they got a massive waiting list. You go, okay, right, it's 2 years for me to get one. It's going to cost 25 grand a year to insure it. As soon as I get it in 2 years' time, and I've spent 25 grand to insure it, you then go, it's going to get nicked.
Not if you've got a $6.99 steering lock on it. That's the.
But then it makes me want it more.
Yeah, does it though?
Yeah, it does. I really want one. I love the idea.
Well, you're one of those people then who gets gooey at the thought of this substandard vehicle. Well, and that's the brand. Well, and also, you love the idea of driving around and saying to people, "Yeah, I've got the Rangy outside, and I'm driving the Range Rover down to Cobham this evening." It's the brand value. It gives you a sense of having arrived, doesn't it? Because rich, successful people have Range Rovers.
I want the Land Rover Defender, not the Range Rover.
But aren't they all there? The Land Rover Defender is pretty similar. I mean, the number of farmers who actually have them and put hay in the back is minuscule. The number of people who put sort of a pair of shoes in the back and a cashmere hat is far higher.
A pair of Gucci loafers.
A pair of Gucci loafers and a pair of Manolo Blahniks.
But in that instance, though, isn't that interesting? Because that's the whole thing about brand as well. Is like it's like who's your audience and like how are you going to tap into them? And like whilst that brand might be right for me, there's brands that are right for you.
Well, there's
so like what brands speak to you, for example? Like we've now gone down this car.
Well, no, okay, we can forget.
But go on. This is kind of interesting. Like what? You've worked on car brands?
Yes, many, and several, and but never ones I really particularly liked. I mean, I did work on Peugeot, and I've got something about me. I like Peugeots. I don't know quite why. I tend to like old Peugeots rather than new Peugeots. But there's something quite nice about the Peugeot brand. I don't quite know why. But the car brand that's obviously the most admired car brand in the world, and I believe it's the most valuable, it might even be the most valuable brand in the world, is Porsche. And I'm always, is it Porsche or Porsche? And
I think it's Porsche.
And I'm saying what a great brand is, but no, we don't even know how to say it.
But we always say this to our clients, which is it actually doesn't matter.
David Bowie.
It does, exactly.
Who cares?
No one cares.
I think he might have cared, but I don't know what the answer is. But anyway, Porsche is a brilliant, brilliant brand because... I mean, there's the scarcity thing and rationing. Yeah. They do this whole rationing thing. It's like a Rolex. You can't actually get a Porsche if you want to.
Well, you need to get on the waiting list.
And then you get a shit one.
Yeah.
And then 5 years later, they'll give you a slot for the one you actually wanted.
Also, have you heard of that? It's exhibition only.
No, what's that?
Which is like the stores. If you go into the store and try,
is that what they have a little sign?
But it's like, oh yeah, I'd like to buy a Rolex or a Porsche. And they're like, oh no, this is just exhibition only.
It's like serving suggestion on the breakfast cereal, isn't it? But you don't get a banana.
But it just shows that it's not like it's not a shop, it's not a store, it's not a show. It's literally just an exhibition. They're exhibiting Porsche,
an exhibition of things you can't have.
Exactly.
Anyway, so Porsche does something brilliantly, which is they pull off this duality, and this is another thing about what makes a great brand. They are very consistent. In other words, the cars all look somehow quite similar. So from the most modern one, the Taycan, the big giant electric thing that weighs about 9 tons, all the way down to the Boxster. Does that still exist? That's their entry-level one, isn't it? Through all the other ones, there's a similarity of looks. They sort of maintain this incredible consistency, but they also do huge amounts of innovation. So there's always new news coming, new models. Within those models, there's dozens of category, the GTS, the this, the that, Carrera. So they do that brilliant job of lots of new news the whole time, lots of choice, but always held together by an incredibly consistent look and feel. In terms of advertising, they don't seem to do it. I mean, they must do some, but in terms of formal advertising, like good old advertising that you and I would recognise, I haven't seen an advert for a Porsche for ages, but I'm very aware of it as a brand. So that's an example for me of. You certainly arrive at Porsche predisposed to think it's absolutely marvellous.
And that's presumably something that's been... That's taken years for you to get to that point, though. To the point where you are...
Who, me?
You put, like, as in the famous thing, right, is that with car brands, they're advertising to you over a 20-year period or a 50-year period or something like...
Yeah. They're not advertising for you to buy the car tomorrow. They're advertising to put a seed in your mind, and 10 years later you go, God, I really, really want a Fiat Cinquecento. Yeah.
So with that in mind then, but like that's almost like quite highbrow, isn't it? It's like, oh, like a lot of people listening to this might be going like, oh, I don't have 50
Look
years.
at those rich wankers talking about cars.
Exactly. I don't have 50 years to like convince someone to buy my fucking like nuts on Amazon. I need someone. Why should I do it now? Like, what's the benefit of thinking about brand and marketing and advertising now? Like, can you think of any like tangible examples of anything that you've done in your career where you've gone using a color or a bit of language or something has like transformed someone's business overnight? Like, is there it?
Well, there must be numerous examples of that. I can't actually think of any. I think the way brands work in the here and now is that they enable you to do things with your product that you couldn't otherwise do. For example, and the main one being attract more attention than you would get if you were just buying your media. So having a bit of a brand and populating that brand with loads of interesting content. And I think the whole point about smaller brands is to have an attitude and a point of view, and just try and be a bit different, and say things in a slightly different way, and stick to your point of view.
Yeah, I mean, we're living in the attention economy, right?
So, well, yeah, everyone is seeking attention, and there's not enough sort of time and space for every brand to get attention. So you need to win, and whoever wins the attention game will win the sales game.
So a brand is an attention
machine
gathering tool or machine.
Yeah, exactly. And also then brand. I mean, by the way, we're going to look afterwards at this and we're going to go, shit, there's a load of textbooks that say what we're saying is absolute rubbish, written by the professor of marketing at sort of Princeton or something. But anyway, I don't care what he thinks. The other thing with brands is they do open up for you things like price premiums.
Right.
So you can take a product and you can charge more for it if it's got a brand people like. But I think that's probably more in the kind of Hellman's mayonnaise kind of school of thought.
Right.
I think if you're an entrepreneur and you're selling your small business service or product, I think what the brand simply does is give you the chance to stand out a bit more from the crowd. And the reason for that is simple. If you are producing, let's say, adverts or content, and you've got a small business, and your adverts and content are always rational, they're about what your product can do and where it's great, you're going to run out of that pretty soon, aren't you?
Whereas generally that's what everyone else is doing as well.
And it's not that interesting.
And also,
well, maybe it is interesting.
But chances are you're also not in a particularly unique category. You might not be just selling anything particularly unique.
So imagine you're selling baby clothes. Your baby clothes might have better seams on them and more patterns and better design and actually more cute and beautiful to look at. But once you've gone through all that a few times, whereas the brand, if you had a fantastic brand, it just gives you another bunch of stuff to talk about, which is you can talk about things related to baby clothes in this example, but not just about the baby clothes. You can talk about sort of baby care. You can talk about parenting. You can talk about education. And having a brand just gives you the opportunity to have an attitude and a point of view which distinguishes you from everyone else flogging the same stuff as you. And that's got to be good, because the other thing you and I know is that producing lots of content is another key to winning as a digital brand, let's say. It's an absolute key to winning. You've got to produce a load of content and keep refreshing it. So then you get to that stage where you go, right, I'm producing loads of content, but I've got to stay consistent. So you've got to sort of fight that battle. And I want to keep the content interesting. And a brand does all of that. The brand helps you stay consistent because it's got some rules. The brand helps you do lots of content because it gives you stuff to talk about that's not rational. And the brand helps you cut through and sell more because people see it and they go, oh, that's old Smiggins baby clothes.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think for me, consistency is the number one rule for building a successful brand over the longer run. And it simply comes down to multiple messages over time. Like if you can be consistent, and that might be consistency through color, consistency through messaging, consistency through imagery. The more you can be consistent, the more people start to build up a bit of a mental picture of what your brand is, right? And if you're constantly flip-flopping between different things, then suddenly, of course, that's going to be less efficient. People are going to be seeing different... People are going to be getting literally mixed messages from you as a brand. So I think for me, it's if you can be consistent over time with your brand, whether it's your visual style, your verbal style, the way you package up your products, etc., that feels to me like a really kind of quick win, if you like, from a brand.
I agree, but I always temper that with lots of variety. So it is there's a real tension there. Lots of variety and stuff and interesting things held together by a consistent set of art directional or visual rules or something. But it is the combination of both of those things. But if you can pull that off, deep consistency and lots of variety, then that's got to, I mean, this is, that's genius right there. I mean, that's worth millions, what I've just said there. But that should be the answer, shouldn't it? And particularly in digital media, which is so hungry for novelty. I mean, we've been discussing recently the algorithms used by the big social platforms favors novelty over almost everything else. So if you've got a beautiful piece of content that does a really good job and it's a fantastic, lovely thing you made 6 months ago and it's now been run thousands of times, but it's genius, that will do less well than a piece of shit produced 5 minutes ago and churned out because the algorithm grabs onto the new and pushes that further up. So you've got to constantly be refreshing. which is why, and that's another reason why brand is important to small businesses, because in a world where you've got to constantly refresh your content, it's very easy to lose your way and go, sorry, what am I doing again? What am I talking about? What's separating me and my product from all my rivals and my peers?
Yeah, that is really interesting, isn't it? And like, especially when we see like platforms like TikTok, Meta, the Facebook, Instagram suite, LinkedIn, as you say, when they're favoring new content generation every week, small businesses need to be producing this stuff every day, every couple of days. New stuff needs to be going out and, changing up that content, producing new materials. That's quite difficult though, isn't it, for a small business?
Well, it's almost like what you would need would be some sort of platform that would kind of help you. dragNdrop.com.
Yeah, go on. So tell us about dragNdrop then. Go on. So you and I run this business, dragNdrop.
Right.
How have we ended up here? Why are we doing this? Like, what the hell are we doing?
Have we worked out how to pronounce it? That's the key. So that when we pronounce it, people automatically know how it sounds.
dragNdrop.
So does that sound like dragon, as in the animal, drop?
You can see what's going to happen. Like at some point, we're going to brief an agency to come up with a big TV advertising idea for us.
And they'll do the dragon.
The dragon
Hi,
drop.
I'm Max the Dragon.
Exactly.
And here at dragNdrop. Oh, fuck.
And the other creative idea will be dragNdrop. So it'll be, hi, I'm Drag.
I'm Drop.
And together we are
dragNdrop. I'm the crazy one. You're the sensible one. Anyway, so dragNdrop.
So what is dragNdrop?
It is... All the things we've been talking about are the things that you and I have heard from our clients. And our clients have been small businesses and entrepreneurs and ambitious companies and disruptor sort of companies. But that's who we've been working with since 2015. Mm-hmm. And what you and I have heard throughout that time is we need to get lots of content out. We need lots of variety. And if you work in a sort of agency environment or even in a freelance environment, it's expensive. The more stuff you want, the more they're charging you. So you go to your freelance designer or your freelance copywriter or whatever it is, and you say to them, I need 20 things, that's going to cost you 20 times more than saying I need one thing, or it's going to cost you a multiple anyway. dragNdrop.com is a platform that enables ambitious entrepreneurs to produce their own social and digital content online using our templates. So what it's hopefully doing is tapping into this thing that we're discussing, which is keeping consistency, producing lots of content, but making it very easy and straightforward for people to do it, so that a small business who doesn't know how to do lots of content can do it through our platform. And that's the sort of secret to it. And there are other platforms available out there, and there's big ones like Canva.
So why is dragNdrop different then?
I think you say, why is it better? And I was about to go, Canva is brilliant, but Canva is huge. And every time I go onto Canva, I'm just overwhelmed by choices and options and templates and too much stuff. And it doesn't seem to have been at all curated. In other words, it just seems they've sort of spaffed everything they possibly can out there. And there are so many pool party invites and so many wedding invites. And I wade through all that stuff and you get to some brilliance. What dragNdrop does is remove all the things that small businesses and ambitious entrepreneurs don't need. We're not going to be the wedding invite template company. We're not going to be birthday cards. We're not going to do any of that stuff. We're going to do templates for social and digital media designed to help small businesses make their brands or their businesses more famous. And those templates will be what separates us from... Well, the technology of our platform is brilliant, but the technology of a lot of platforms is brilliant. The creativity behind it is what makes it different.
And we're doing all sorts of interesting stuff, aren't we, in terms of partnering with creators, creatives globally. And what we essentially want to do is create a space that any ambitious entrepreneur can go to, and it's like they are accessing the world's best creative talent. So we've got, designers and creatives on the platform who are building templates for us from big agencies like Mother, M&C Saatchi, Widens, as well as being, creators themselves. A lot of influencers we're going to be partnering with. Anyone that's good at building their own brands are going to be on the platform building templates for us, and any dragNdrop customer is going to be able to go on there and use those templates and use those templates.
They sort of cheat the system.
They cheat the system, exactly. Because, we hear this all the time, things like typefaces, for example. Like typefaces, there are millions of typefaces globally, right? and it's so overwhelming to try and navigate through typefaces. Like,
do you ever get typeface blindness, where
Exactly.
you scroll through and you go, I hate all of these typefaces. I can't find a single one.
Well, exactly.
And then you get to the sort of zany area where there are those kind of crazy ones with sort of big bubbly sort of, and it's like, where are all the good ones gone? And then you end up using, what's the one we all use? Arial or no Helvetica or something, and everyone ends up using the same ones. And that's because you haven't had, there's sort of overload. Whereas if you've got, how many typefaces have we got on the platform?
I think we have.
100 or something?
I think we actually have 1,000 on the platform.
God,
but the point being, we will recommend typefaces for certain templates. We'll recommend color palette combinations for certain templates, and the point being that we are giving advice and curation to our customers and saying, this goes with this. It's a bit like, we were actually talking before this about recipe boxes. Rich and I used to work with HelloFresh for a number of years. We're actually recording this podcast round the corner from where HelloFresh were based. HelloFresh is recipe boxes.
Happy days.
Lovely days. HelloFresh, as you know, is a sort of recipe box. The ingredients come in the box. You get a little kit which says, put your carrots in with your beans and make a little thing up. I see what we're doing as quite similar to that, which is we're basically pairing that sausages go with tomatoes and a bit of oregano.
We might be editing this out. I'm not sure whether this analogy is going to stand up, but let's keep going. Come on, fight the way through.
Let's see whether it stands up. Versus going into, versus going into a supermarket and going, right, what should I cook for dinner tonight? I've got ultimate choice to cook anything.
Okay.
And what we're saying is,
so recipe boxes are like templates. They give you the sort of ingredients.
Exactly. Oh. Yeah. They are like curated templates that allow you to cook like a pro, cook like a professional chef, albeit we've made a load of decisions behind the scenes for you. And that's what we're doing essentially, isn't it? We are saying this typeface goes with this typeface, which goes with this color palette, which goes with these photos, and it can fit in any way you want it to.
But at the same time, people can drag and drop their own stuff onto any one of our templates. So it's kind of like guidelines and a template that you can follow with enough scope to change it to mean you don't have to slavishly follow it. You don't have to stick with what we've got. It just so happens what we've got has been through the tried and tested, process of being designed by the best designers, curated by ourselves, put on the platform, monitored. If it's too successful, we withdraw it and replace it with another one, because you don't want people using the same templates too often. And if it's not successful enough, we withdraw it as well. So we constantly rotate the creative templates.
And also, I think things like people find typefaces complicated, like color as well. Like there's a whole art in like color picking and choosing colors. And you and I used to work with there's a very famous creative director who used to work in advertising, who I was chatting to him about color once, and we were doing a big project for a big global client, and we were doing their new color palette. And I said to him, how do you even start going about thinking about color for a client? And then he said, to be honest, I look at old movie posters and look at what colors go together, and then I start there, and I kind of go, and I copy them basically.
Yeah.
And you go, actually, that's just a really good cheat. And then suddenly we then go online and we're looking at old Stanley Kubrick posters. And going,
yellow and purple.
Yellow, purple, and orange go together quite nicely.
Yeah, I get it. I think that's really.
That's just templating. But
it is templating, and also though, if you don't have access to that particular creative director and his little cheat there, his hack, then how are you ever going to know what colours go together and the type? And as you say, what makes a fantastic template? What makes a fantastic execution or an advert? If you haven't got access to that creative, how on earth do you ever go about it? Well, the answer is that the platforms like ours are designed to hopefully sort of short circuit that whole thing and make accessible to millions of small businesses around the world what was previously only accessible to a tiny handful of big companies, all of whom basically spent their lives rejecting the advice of that creative director and saying they knew best, and all choosing the colour blue, which is that sort of default colour of brands. And so this should enable the
By the way, that is also the colour of our brand.
Oh, is it? Oh, shit, sorry. Fuck yeah. No, we're electric. We're electric blue. Electric blue. Not the same thing as the dark blue, beloved of everyone else. But, the idea of opening up all that knowledge and wisdom and creativity to every small business is just a fantastic privilege.
Also, sometimes it's just about having someone or something, in this instance, this platform, showing you and giving you the confidence to do it yourself. So, for example, like just having someone say this orange goes with this yellow, and right now go and get on with it yourself. Like that's encouraging as someone that doesn't know anything about branding, right? Because you've just had someone else tell you what's, in the same way that a doctor might say to you, "You're absolutely fine, Richard. Just go home and monitor it." And you're like, "Okay, fine."
Dead the following day.
But it does take some
authority, a bit of
authority, doesn't it?
Yeah, and authority is built on experience and having done it hundreds of times before and knowing what works and what doesn't. And I look at the templates on our platform, and every single one of them, I can see why it works. I don't like every single one of them. I wouldn't want to use every single one of them, but I can see why every one of them works. And I would try and, if I was a customer of dragNdrop, I would try and choose the ones that I like, but at the same time not be limited just to the ones that I adore. Otherwise you end up with that syndrome, which is you sort of love the template, and by the time you've dragged your own photo and your own headline and things like that, it doesn't look like the template you bought into, because the template you bought into had a lovely photo which was chosen by us. So, use your own taste, but at the same time kind of try some other different things that you wouldn't have tried before, because they've all been tested by us, and they will all work in the right circumstances.
Okay, so that's interesting. So discipline and brand. Like, talk to me about that.
Christ,
you've just disciplined, because you've just said something which is like changing things and kind of flip flopping between stuff, and like I guess it's very.
What's the consistency?
I guess it's very easy just to be like, oh, we'll just as you've said there, you've said on the one hand you want people to be producing lots of material, like sort of quantity, I guess, and on the other hand you've said you want people to produce quality and consistency. How do you balance those two things, and how do you have that discipline to kind of go, okay, I'm going to stick with this now and I'm going to be really consistent? Well,
yeah, you've got to. I mean, the danger of this is we get ourselves into the most frightful muddle and to contradict ourselves. But the obvious thing which we said before was consistency, but lots of content. So there's you can resolve that. On the discipline point, I think it's about not getting bored of your own brand too soon. I mean, the first people who get bored of their own, let's say, executions, their own advertising, is the client, the customer themselves, the brand owner. And I remember hearing sort of apocryphal stories about people at Andrex, the bog roll brand.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
You've heard of it. I wouldn't wipe my ass with that stuff. But anyway, lovely Andrex, soft, strong, and very, very long. It was apparently they were always trying to kill off those golden retriever puppies, because the brand manager, every 3 years, or a new brand manager would arrive on Andrex and go, I've got a brilliant idea. We're going to get rid of those useless old puppies, and we're going to replace them with something, the talking carrot. And it was more senior sort of people within the company, and often the agency actually, who would say, don't get rid of the puppies. They're the most famous thing of all. So that discipline of not getting slightly bored of your own work, whilst producing large amounts of content and keeping it consistent.
Yeah.
I mean that is why templates are such a good idea, because they enable you to do all of those things. They make volume easy, they keep you disciplined, and they allow you to stay consistent, to your brand look.
I guess like the cliched brand that resonates, globally is Nike, right? And
that's what I was about to say. Apple. That's the other one, isn't it?
That's the other
There's
one.
the two.
I'm just thinking like Nike, just
do you mean
do
Nike?
Nike. There you go.
You get another one.
Just do it. Like, obviously, like you can question whether that's a good slogan or not, and but I think one thing you can say is they've used that now for decades and decades and decades. Well, so whether it's good or not, who cares? Like,
but have they stopped using it?
I think they're still using it.
I've not seen it for a while. I've not. Oh Christ, we're not allowed to do this halfway through a podcast.
It's just check.
I mean, our audience of 6, which was now 3, has now become 1, on the grounds that they don't want to watch you looking things up on your laptop.
They still use it.
Do they? I've not seen that on their adverts. I've seen loads of stuff, and I've seen the swoosh and all that stuff, but I haven't seen Just Do It for years.
No, it's definitely there.
I think they might have done a bit of psychometric testing.
It's literally the first. It's on their like fucking
Google
search thing.
Oh well, there you go.
Anyway, the point being is it's that consistency over time, the discipline to have it still, to keep it there, even though there you go, you wanted to kill it off.
Well, no, I actually did. I'd vote for. I'm a keeper on the grounds that I quite like slightly abrasive, imperative-y slogans like "Just Do It." And you can see, by the way, so many people trying to. I mean, it must be the most copied and the most failed to be copied slogan of all time, because everyone always quits on it halfway because they go. The old classic, you and I have discussed this, which is how to destroy the slogan "Just Do It."
Well, tell people where it came from.
Well, no, you'd go, "Let's do it."
Oh, okay, that one.
You do that whole sort of, together we can do it. You would just try and make it more warm.
But famously, it was actually written by a guy who was on death row.
When was it?
And in the 50s or 60s, and he basically was like, "Just do it." You know, like he was literally standing
he said
there
it,
waiting,
and
then some copywriter or someone.
No, the guy who found. It was the famous ad guy.
But anyway, someone basically said was like, just get on with it, just do it.
And he thought
the
guy
guy wrote it down and was like, that's perfect for things. So that would be another way of killing it off by basically saying to the CEO, look, it was actually said by someone. Yeah, exactly. But the point being, they have used that consistently, decade in, decade out, for 50 years now. That is why, irrespective of whether it's any good or not, the reason it is powerful and a useful piece of branding is the consistency over time, right?
Yes, but also it means different things to different people, so everyone can get their own meaning. The reason it's so rich, it's utterly meaningless in many ways. I mean, just everyone goes, "What's it?" All sort of silly questions like that. But each individual audience member, it means something slightly different. So you can impose your own personal view onto it. So it's a very sort of open slogan. But also it's got a lovely pokey quality to it.
Yeah. So what about? So that's everyone can put their own meaning into it. What about a brand that is divisive? Is it ever good to divide?
Yeah, definitely.
And to
divide
Richard's
society.
Now getting excited.
No, it's definitely
not necessarily
good.
Divide society, but like, is it good to alienate people? I guess is my question.
Yes.
And maybe that's not right for all brands, but like, what's an example of a brand that alienates people? Like, if I'm thinking off the top of my head, I'm thinking like, is it called like Death Water or something? Is it Death Water?
Oh, I know the one you're talking about.
It's like it's valued at like $1 billion or something. They basically took a can of water and were like, they basically took a bottle of water and were like, this is very ordinary. Like all of them look the same. To give your example of what you were talking about earlier, they all look the same. I'm not coming predisposed to any of these things. Fiji's too expensive, and they were like, how do we take that kind of death metal, angry approach and apply it to water?
Yes.
And they've done that, and they've associated themselves with music. They've got all sorts of partnerships, and suddenly they've created a brand which is incredibly powerful. But it's because they've gone, right, 90% of people will look at this and think it looks horrible. 10% of people want to drink something that looks anarchic.
Yeah, and dark and things. That's why I think it is very good to alienate people, and I think it is very good to the obvious art is alienating the wrong people and highly engaging with the right people in terms of who your audience might be. But I don't like brands that try and appeal to everyone. And the idea of a bunch of people not liking something is no problem. I mean, that's part of everything. It's part of life. But big brands and big brands that most agencies work on spend their whole lives trying not to alienate anybody. And you end up, therefore, with sort of, no one's a big fan, no one's a big detractor, everyone's sort of in the middle, no one's got much of a point of view about you. Whereas if you do have a strong point of view, you'll have people for you and you'll have people against you. But the people for you will be super for you and will become evangelical about your brand. And the ones who are against you would probably have been against you anyway. So I don't like this. Any slogan that begins with the word "let's," anyone who uses the word "together," all those things, those little cheat words, just designed to make everyone feel that they're all being appealed to. It's just mediocre sort of nonsense to me. And I like the idea of a brand that I'm really passionate about, but other people don't get and don't see.
Give me an example.
I thought you might ask that. Oh Christ. Okay, hang on. Well, Hoka, the shoe. I actually wear Hoka shoes.
Richard was an early adopter to Hoka shoes.
But I don't
before all the cool kids got on it.
Yeah, but also now Hoka's got these sort of giant soles. But anyway, I think I liked Hoka because it's slightly orthopedic in its approach to trainers, and I have certain walking needs. So, But I liked Hoka because it was sort of no brand. I mean, I like Muji and things. I like these sort of no brand stuff. I can't bear "obey" written on someone's hacks. It's just so obvious. Hoka, I'm pointing at my Hoka shoe, is good because they sort of are the inverse of a brand. They don't make big brand points. They're quite rational and quite low key and lo-fi and that sort of stuff. So that's why I
think
wear
you're going to
them.
be angry though. I think they are starting to do a lot of that stuff.
The logo seems to be getting very large onto their shoes. Now you're going to look at it again. I agree, but help me find me a new trainer brand that is really good quality, is recommended by knee surgeons around the world, and is yet to be discovered, and I'll be in.
Okay, here's something for you. There, I just had a look there. I remember now. I've seen their advertising all over London over the last few months.
God, are they?
Fly Human Fly is their line by the looks.
Fly Human Fly.
Fly Human Fly. When I move my body, I change my world. When I run, I fly. How does that make you feel as a Hoka customer?
Well, I've never run anywhere. So I'm automatically alienated, and that's a good thing according to us. I do. I'm quite clever at screening out advertising for brands I buy and like, but when I see the advertising I hate, I just sort of take no notice of it because I don't want to have my world view destroyed. I still like Hoka. I feel they're drifting away from me slightly, and I'd like them to come back.
But something that's interesting about Hoka, and we kind of mentioned it before about like emotion versus function, is like finding some kind of brand space within function and functionality, and being like you mentioned Apple before. Like obviously it's a kind of overused, cliched example of stuff, but
it's an example of everything. Though,
exactly,
isn't it? Everything and nothing.
I obviously don't even want to go there, but like Hoka is a good example of like engineering a good product, and I'm sure like a lot of small businesses will be focused on engineering their product and building their product and optimizing their product and service and all that sort of stuff. So what about using your product and your experience as a way of communicating your brand?
Well, like we said earlier, that's a great way to start. It's the only way to start. Start with your rational benefits and with what's better about your product and why it's superior, and then nice little stories, how it's made, the product, the substances that are used, the high quality of the ingredients, all that. That's all fantastic, and can get you a long way. I just think beyond that, fly human fly, you need to have something else to talk about, particularly in fashion, but I mean across the piece, something else to talk about other than the rational benefits of why it's a great product, which is where we go back to the brand conversation earlier. But yeah, start with the rational, and also try and focus on, before you do any of this stuff, make sure your product you've got is a bit, if it can be, a bit better, or has something that other people haven't got. And I'm forever struck by the fact that whenever you travel around a city and you look at all the shops and the brands that you have presented to you in the adverts and all of that, how many of them are the same as each other? How little differentiation there is. And I think this is the sort of flattening effect of media proliferation, of brand cowardice, of corporatizing everything, decision-making being made by 11 different people. Entrepreneurs and founders of businesses are free to make their own decisions. And the best advertising examples over the last few years have often been entrepreneurs just having a crack at it and doing an interesting little bit of content online, and it goes ballistic and everyone absolutely loves it. So I do think... Where was I on that conversation? Because I think I was answering the question about Hoka, but I've gone on about. I suppose it goes back to have an attitude and don't worry if you alienate a few of the wrong people.
Can it do you know what one question that we always get asked is, like, we deal a lot with startup scale ups, and then we also deal with corporate businesses, and a lot of people are nervous.
But we tend not to deal with very big. The big corporates who are sort of drudging through more of the same aren't our world.
But I guess I'm thinking. Sometimes we deal with corporate stakeholders, investors. I think there's a lot of nervousness sometimes with branding, communications, marketing, advertising, to maybe we're going to do something bad. Like something bad's going to happen.
Exactly.
There's everyone's always worried.
You'll ruin the whole brand, like Hoover did.
Exactly.
They've got about 2 examples in the last 50 years.
That's kind of like where I want to go with
Pepsi, where's my jet?
It didn't it never exactly. It never happens, does it? Really?
Never.
And also,
I have tried to ruin many, many brands, And we have produced mediocrity, and indeed worse than mediocrity, on numerous occasions. Actually,
You have.
I have. Normally by mistake, actually, as it happens. But you cannot sink these brands. I mean, you could produce absolute terrible dross, which tells you the bar is very low, and that's very encouraging, because it means that if you do something even slightly good and even slightly different, and even with a tiny bit of personality, I mean, brands that don't have any personality are everywhere. Whereas a brand with a little bit of personality and a worldview is such a rarity.
Yeah.
And as an entrepreneur, you can do that. As the fourth marketing manager on a well-known brand of squeezable sauce or something, exactly. You can't do anything. You know that you can't do anything because the people at the top of Procter and Gamble will have you shot if you dare drift away from the bold guidelines. Whereas if you're creating your own soap powder for the first time and you're doing it yourself, you can do something really different. I don't know how people make soap powder. I think it's very complicated, but you can, and that's why entrepreneurs should produce as much work as they can with attitude, whilst alienating people, consistent to their brand guidelines. They should do all this stuff, because you're not going to be able to do it. If you're a success, your investors will tell you to stop doing it because you're endangering the brand. And if you go and work if you're a failure and you go and work for another big company, you go, oh, sorry, I'm not an entrepreneur, that all failed. I'll go and work for Unilever. You won't be allowed to do it. So do it while you can.
Yeah, okay. Tell me, that's actually reminded me of when you actually did nearly fuck it up for, was it for BA?
Probably.
Which specific? It was almost like the Pepsi example, but like giving away...
we didn't have the right T's and C's.
Yeah, go on.
T's and C's are terms and conditions, that little bit of type at the bottom of a execution. And we were letting off balloons in central London, which really, I mean, what disaster could possibly strike as a balloon goes up in the air in the flight path for British Airways. Anyway, we didn't have the right T's and C's on the bottom of this thing, and it was giving away money.
And what was it?
It was a voucher.
It was a voucher. So it was a balloon with a voucher on it.
With a voucher attached. And it was for the launch of... Maybe it was New Club World. Was it New World Traveller? Anyway, it was something. And
you were in charge of making sure.
Well, I wasn't in charge. Let's be absolutely clear. I was a mere cog in a very complex engine, Your Honour. Anyway, so we released all these balloons with these vouchers on, and the vouchers should have said cannot be redeemed for money or something or other. Only redeemable, because they would have things like £100 written on them.
Right. Okay.
And that would give you £100 off an airfare. This is from memory. But we failed to print the T's and C's correctly because we'd rushed it through because we were so excited by the idea of letting off balloons in London. And then a lawyer sort of said, I think you'll find that you've released £7 million worth of potential liabilities for the company. Anyway, we thought, oh, Christ. So we sort of raced around London gathering up what balloons we could find, and but no one ever claimed it. And that's an example there of, though, you can spook yourself on absolutely everything if you want to. But generally speaking, the worst doesn't happen. And we're dealing with, and with creativity and execution and advertising and content, if someone's noticed it enough to complain and say how mortified they are and how they now will never buy your dog food ever again, that's an incredible victory for you. Because the worst thing is not being noticed. And talking of the attention economy, most people pay no attention to these commercial messages that come spaffing towards you at a rate of knots every day. So to do something which people notice is the only game in town.
Yeah.
If you're not looking,
you're not looking, you're not seeing it, right?
Yeah.
People are not comprehending your message. We always say customers have got budget X, but they've got ambition Y. And there's a gap between those things, right? And that's what we call the attention gap. And if you can just say something a little bit more interesting, or look a little bit more interesting, or use a more interesting colour, you're just starting to narrow that gap down. You've got more chance of success. You've got more chance of driving predisposition.
But isn't it incredible that 50 or 100 years after the sort of dawn of advertising, and sort of 50 years since advertising really became a thing, very few people still realise that the only trick to cheating the entire advertising system in the whole world is to do something a bit different and interesting. I mean, and yet everyone goes, I think I'll produce the same, more or less the same as I did last time. That seems to be the better solution. And it's easy to say. It's not easy to do. I refer to dragNdrop.com, which makes it easy to do. But it is a very simple trick to pull off. And the advertising industry is wall to wall with creatives sitting in teams, sort of thinking, how can we be different and do that? And yet somehow through this process, primarily too many people with sign off. But anyway, great, lovely, interesting, chucklesome executions don't come out. And what does come out is Frankie Bridge using Perfectil. I love my Perfectil, says Frankie Bridge. I mean, Vitabiotics being the soul-sapping destroyers of most TFL inventory.
I also think that if I think about examples over the recent years of like massive success as a result of being generous with creativity, we often talk about being generous with creativity, right? Which is just like, don't like limit your creativity and don't limit your content. Just enjoy it and try and get as much stuff out there as you can.
Produce it less expensively and make more of it.
Yeah. The great rationer of creativity in communications advertising was Bernie Ecclestone, who used to own Formula One. And he basically sat on Formula One for so many years and kept it as like a closed, like walled garden where basically he was the boss and didn't allow anyone, like he didn't let Lewis Hamilton use social media, he didn't let any of the teams or drivers use social media, and he just sort of kept it really closed. And because he'd had his deals wrapped up with Sky and all the kind of global media companies globally, as soon as he sells it to Liberty Media through the various deals that happened along the way, suddenly they sat on this asset and they were like, it's valued at X, but we don't do any communications. We've just sat on this thing and it's basically had zero growth over the years. They do a quick deal with Netflix, allow all the drivers and teams to flood their social media accounts. Suddenly, the amount of content that's being produced is ridiculous. It's happening 24/7. We've got this documentary series, Drive to Survive, happening. And suddenly the value of Formula One has gone up like 100x. And we've got new teams coming in now, wanting to come in. And it's just like, it's a classic, it's like the best example I can think of in recent years of being generous with creativity and flooding social media and
well, just allowing, taking the handbrake off.
Exactly.
Metaphorically.
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, but once if you really do, if there's an element of enthusiasm and excitement and spontaneity and not too much policing with people sort of scrutinizing, oh, you can't say that. The only issue I've got with Formula One, I mean, I agree with you, and and obviously you're talking about Drive to Survive, and who isn't, but is that we do know who's going to win next year's championship. You know, there is an element of the sport which has gone a bit wrong. As a phenomenon and as a media thing, it's great. But if you can predict who's going to win next season, that isn't what sport's about.
That's just a product issue.
Are there on? But
that's a product issue.
Well, it's a sort of sport governing body. I don't know. I don't know how it works. I mean, but we'll probably be sued by FIA. They'll have watched it though, have a strong point of view. But whereas things like Formula E are much less predictable, and are environmentally sound, obviously, but also you don't know who's going to win that because that's a sort of crazy overtaking game. And is much more exciting in my view.
But they're doing lots of interesting stuff as well. You know, in terms of getting their brand out there, loads of interesting partnerships, putting races in places that Formula One wouldn't do. Exactly.
Isn't that there?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Henry Chilcott, tell us what was that. But it's just about it's about, as you say, leaning into it, doing more stuff, not less. And suddenly creativity can suddenly start generating new ideas for you in terms of, if you're loving it and you're going, okay, great, like the Formula One example, they're doing lots of stuff. Suddenly they're really big in the US. They launched the Vegas Grand Prix. And before you know it, it starts snowballing and things become easier. I guess is my point.
Yeah. No, it does. It does. If you actually do try and enjoy the process of producing work and creativity, and you find it relatively easy, and templates are designed to help people do that, it should be an absolute joy and a pleasure because you think to yourself, do you know what? Here's a really interesting thing I want to say to my customers of my dog food. And you can put it out there and say, and it just becomes this fantastic self-fulfilling prophecy. I do think enthusiasm and positivity, not a sort of, goofy positivity, but a bit of enthusiasm for your brand and your product and actually really enjoying it goes a hell of a long way. But people get very jaded very quickly.
Consistency.
Yeah.
Quantity.
Yeah.
Enjoy your brand and your marketing and enjoy leaning into creativity. And
Discipline. Bit of discipline. But also, do produce more than you feel you really want to. And
game the algorithm.
Game the algorithm.
Basically, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
All of the networks favor quantity over quality. If you can do
novelty.
If you can do quantity, but do it in a consistent and quality way, then you will win.
Yeah.
Basically, that's it, isn't it?
That's the answer.
That is the answer. So look, thank you, Richard. That's been great. We will have you back on as the marketing maestro. I want to do a piece with you
when you can't find anyone else.
Well, we can't find anyone else, yeah, basically. But look, thanks everyone for listening. Thanks to those 6 listeners for listening. If there are specific things you want to know about how to build a brand, where to get started, what are the little cheats in terms of like the algorithms or like which platforms you should be using, send those questions in and we'll make sure we get guests on that are capable of answering those questions and can help you cheat your way around building a brand, because ultimately the brand lever is a really important one to start growing your business, and we want to help small businesses globally grow their business. Thanks very much.